Webcast, 5 critical business problems solved with analytics, presented by industry experts from Frost & Sullivan and VPI. My name is Candace Scheitelman, and I'll be your host today. To avoid interruptions, all attendees have been placed in listen-only mode. If you have any questions during the webcast, please type them into the GoToMeeting question box on the right side of your screen. We will try to answer as many of your questions as possible at the end of the webcast. We also request your help in taking a brief 2-question survey after the webcast. We value your feedback as it helps us to continue to improve the quality of our events. Next slide, please. Analytics is important to today's contact centers because it's the best mechanism around for finding the sources of expensive problems and then zeroing in on practical solutions. Modern centers have warehouses of data that can help them pinpoint exactly where resources should be deployed, but only if you use today's powerful automated systems to drill down to root causes. This webcast will highlight 5 thorny and expensive issues that bedevil every service delivery organization and show how paying attention to the rich data can point to practical solutions, solutions that save money, make the center more efficient, and boost the customer experience. We are pleased to introduce renowned industry analyst Keith Dawson. Keith has been an authority on call centers and the management of customer care technology since 1990. He is a principal analyst in Frost & Sullivan's contact center practice. As editor of Call Center Magazine, he covered a wide array of tools, including switching and ACDs, outbound dialers, CTI, CRM, and speech recognition. He has blended that with a deep knowledge of the operational techniques and business practices inside contact centers. Keith has written thousands of articles, as well as several definitive books, including the now classic Call Center Handbook. His particular interest in recent years has been the customer experience, how it is measured, and whether companies are using the contact center as well as they can to manage that experience to their advantage. Today, Keith will speak about the developing capabilities of analytics systems, trends in the use of analytics in contact centers, and limitations of traditional approaches to solving these 5 problems. He'll also share how analytics acts as a game changer by providing insight into root causes and pointing toward solutions to each of the 5. Keith is joined by Patrick Boats. Patrick is Vice President of Workforce Optimization at VPI, Voice Print International. Leveraging over a decade of field experience as a contact center optimization practitioner, he focuses on the mission-critical aspects of capturing customer intelligence and proactively optimizing workforce performance. Patrick holds an MBA from Pepperdine University and a BSc in engineering from Arizona State University. His work has been published in several contact center industry periodicals, including Call Center Magazine, CRM Magazine, Customer Interaction Solutions, Connections Magazine, the Call Center Times, and Contact Professional. Today, Patrick will introduce you to specific technology approaches to the 5 problems and present analytics use cases that illustrate best practices. And now it's my pleasure to give you Keith Dawson.
Thank you very much, Candace. There are 2 sides to how we think about customer service delivery. On the one hand, we know that it's a deeply personal, experiential activity. And when we're customers, we want our hands held, we want our problems solved, and when we're inside the call center, service delivery is a very human, certainly a very labor-intensive system. And on the other hand, it's also very much a numbers game. Lots of customers generate lots of calls and tons of data about those calls. And adding up that data and figuring out what it means is a lot of heavy lifting for contact centers. And hidden inside the mountains of data about what's happening are the real reasons why things go right or wrong, if you know how to interpret them. And those interpretations are the key to making positive changes that are going to save you money and reduce costs and improve the customer experience. And that, in a nutshell, is what we're talking about when we talk about analytics. So what I'm going to discuss a little bit today is how to leverage analytics to tackle some of the real-life problems that today's contact center professionals have to grapple with. We're going to zero in on 5 of them, and Patrick is going to do the deep dive into exactly how analytics applies specifically in those 5 contexts. But before we do that, I'm going to explain a little bit about the broader picture, what analytics is and how it's currently being used, for one thing. And I'm going to explore what I think is a gap between what people think of when we talk about analytics and what kinds of tools are actually out there that analyze contact center data. And the questions I think that people should really be asking themselves are, what kinds of data do I have, and am I looking at it as thoroughly as I could be, and what is it telling me about how I should be managing my operations? And I'm going to talk about those 5 business problems that we've identified and the limitations of traditional approaches to solving them. In a nutshell, those 5 are: first, contact resolution, improving customer experience and retention, optimizing handle time, accelerating the sales process and the collections process, and making sure that you're in compliance with PCI and other security regimens. So on the next slide, let me start with the scariest stuff first. What the devil is this stuff? How do we define analytics? It's a pretty broad term, and it's one that gets thrown around a lot without a lot of clarity. It's also been around for years, and it's been applied in a number of different contexts, some of which have to do with the contact center, and some of them are only tangentially related. So what we have here is a timeline of some of the important technologies that have been associated with the term analytics over the last 10 years or so. So if you go back about 10 years, contact centers and enterprises were really still functionally very separate at that point, and they used very different kinds of tools. You can ask any IT person who's been around that long, and they're going to tell you that telephony tools lived in the contact center, and by and large, analysis tools lived in the enterprise. So call centers had their call recording systems, and they mainly used them for compliance, and then they started analyzing them by manually listening to random samples of those calls, usually for quality purposes. And this was all very internal to the call center. There's no reason why it wouldn't be. Call centers were trying to improve performance on telephony KPIs, things like average handle time. Enterprises, though, needed different kinds of tools to handle different kinds of data. So business intelligence tools took all of the purchasing and the finance and the payroll data and made sense of that for a very different constituency, for the CFOs and the business analysts. And at the same time, you had speech recognition starting to work better, and that became more common as the front end to a lot of IVR systems. And as time went on, both sides, the contact center and the enterprise, ended up needing more robust reporting tools as their data sources and their operations became much more complex. So they started to see information come in from customers via non-telephony modes, things like the web, and there were some companies that started to cross-breed tools, mainly taking a business intelligence style approach to reporting for call centers. And along around the middle of the decade, people in call centers were starting to call this quote-unquote analytics, even though it had no speech component, and eventually it became what we know today as the performance management tools. Performance management, which is essentially taking what you know about how calls are handled and turning that info into essentially an actionable prescription for doing something in a better way. And that really is the ultimate analytics application. And on a parallel track, some vendors with experience in the speech world started looking into the content of the recorded voice calls that were gathered in huge quantities by the contact centers and their call recording systems. And in that realm, analytics came to mean understanding what the relationship was between contact center performance and the actual things that the agents and customers said verbally, their actual utterances, the unstructured content of the voice call. And now we've gotten to the point where there are many different data sources that hold valuable insights, data from interactions that don't necessarily include voice, web interactions and emails and texts and chat sessions and all of that stuff. And yet they're still sitting in separate silos, and they're sometimes owned by different people inside the company who might know what can be learned from one type of data, but might not know that it's important in solving a problem in some other arm of the service delivery infrastructure. And so we're seeing a plethora of different distinctions being made between speech analytics, for example, or voice analytics, and newer forms like desktop analytics and process analytics and web analytics. So we have a jumble and, to some extent, a lack of clarity among people. When you just talk about what analytics means, it could mean a lot of things. My feeling, though, is that it should refer to all of these things at once, and I'll talk about that in just a second on the next slide. And I think all of that confusion is unnecessary once we step back and look at the big picture, because the goal of the enterprise is to efficiently serve customers, and the goal of all that data, wherever it lives, wherever it's hanging out, is nothing more complex than to tell you what you need to know to provide a better, cheaper service experience. So with that in mind, I think it's more helpful if we think about all these varied applications as different facets of the same kind of jewel. and think about analytics not so much as a technology, but as a methodical process for taking what we know from wherever we learn it, regardless of which application happens to supply it, and applying it to make better decisions about how to allocate resources. Those resources, that bear in the contact center that are important to figure out are things like training and headcount allocation and agent attention. So analytics is a system that gathers data from these dispersed sources and finds patterns in it. And that can mean patterns in the behavior of a particular customer or a type of customer, or it can be patterns in how agents respond to a particular kind of problem or an incident. And then it has to be able to compare what it finds to past findings and to information that's gathered from other sources. And the key other sources here are things like data about the interaction that comes from things like the CRM system or the agent's workforce or workforce management applications, call data from the switch. And all of these things need to be brought into the mix and looked at together. They're all part of the picture, and if you're not looking at them all, you're like the blind man and the elephant. No one is getting the big picture, and no one will be able to figure out exactly how you tackle a big or a fast-changing problem. So maybe the most important thing that analytics has to do is alert the people who can take steps when something has gone out of kilter, perhaps even suggest alternatives. Sometimes that appropriate person is someone inside the center who may need to adjust those resource allocations that I just mentioned, or change processes. But it can also mean people outside the center in departments that are customer related, like marketing or product development or fulfillment. The pattern of analytics is to alert the correct person wherever that person happens to be, whatever that person's role is, by giving them the most appropriate information at the right time. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about some research that we've been doing. So Frost & Sullivan has been tracking the usage rates of some of the applications that I showed you on that very scary slide. And we have some interesting data. And so far, this is unpublished and subject to revision as we continue to analyze it and crunch the numbers. And you notice how I subtly dropped in the meta reference to analytics there. So this is info that should be considered directional at this point and not definitive. We just completed a survey of several hundred contact centers in North America, and we asked whether certain applications were currently being used. And we found that around 20% were using speech analytics, which, just to refresh, speech analytics is the use of analysis tools on unstructured voice recordings. And in something of a surprise, analytics for other channels were being used by 40% of contact centers, things like SMS and chat and email. Performance management was cited by almost 2/3 of contact centers, around 65%. And that indicates a pretty strong acceptance of that wave of analytics applications that have been released in recent years over the latter part of the last decade. And it really does show no signs of abating. When we asked what was on the drawing board for the next 12 to 18 months, the results mirrored current deployments and a lot of interest in analytics for voice recordings and for non-voice interaction channels. And we saw continued expected growth in performance management. Why does performance management do so well? In both questions, I think because people are most interested in analytics in contact centers when it's got a direct impact on solving problems. So people are pretty well sold on the idea that having dashboards and scorecards and targeted information at the agent's desktop, that all of that stuff can help push agents to shift behavior in positive ways. Performance management is analytics that isn't strictly called analytics. But trust me, it is, and it's the leading edge of what is essentially a problem-solving revolution. So let's talk a little bit about the problems themselves. Next slide is first contact resolution. The first major metric to come along that focused on the success of an interaction, not just describing the contours of how long it took to take care of and putting that interaction basically in a box on a shelf. It's the kind of metric that asks a very basic question about whether it was a good or bad interaction and opens the door to further questions like, what can we do with that interaction or that knowledge about it, whether it was good or bad? So basically, to use a baseball analogy, it's like the difference between measuring something very basic, like hits and walks, things that count up activity, versus measuring something that's more meaningful, like RBIs or runs created. It's the beginning of measuring call center activity in terms of the opportunities that are created by each interaction or each call. And that sets the stage for an assessment of whether you're actually capitalizing on those opportunities. If you know your customer satisfaction and your customer retention rates, and you calculate the value of your customers, you're going to need some kind of process-based measurement that tells you how you're handling the processes and the interaction to maximize that value. And frankly, something as vague as service level just isn't granular enough to do the job. What's hard is creating a standard measure that counts across companies and across centers from one set of interactions to another. And the key question, as illustrated by this circular diagram here, is where does the interaction start and stop? What exactly are you counting when you consider a call resolved? We want to consider first call resolution as a measure of a one-and-done interaction, but we need to be really precise and consistent about what we're talking about, whether we include, for example, the IVR touch points or how we bring other channels like web contacts and emails into the mix if we want to create a clear picture of what the customer is experiencing. And a lot of centers have trouble settling on a consistent measure because the interaction crosses barriers internally. On top of that, looking at contact center activity through a first contact resolution lens changes the way agents behave. They're traditionally measured and incented based on things like average speed of answer and average handle time, and talk time, things that they have some degree of control over. But when you start judging them based on resolution, that's going to require a rethink of the kinds of things that you train them on and the kinds of skills that you select for, the kinds of things that you incent in their behavior, because they don't necessarily have control over some aspects of that part of the interaction. And they may resent or behave counterproductively when you're incenting them based on things that they have no control over. On the next slide, analytics lets you get more interesting and relevant information to the agents and to the managers, stuff that goes beyond the very basic that I have too many calls in queue or it's time to cut your break short. We're talking about providing pop-up information that alerts agents to customers that may bolt to a competitor, or guidance for how to deal with that kind of situation. And these kinds of dashboards and scorecards enhance what we know as traditional quality monitoring and coaching and really let you tailor the back-end workflow to perform better. And a lot of centers have invested very heavily in infrastructure that's designed to track and improve those important KPIs and not minimizing them, those things like handle time and the speed of answer and customer satisfaction. But most centers remain stalled, I think, in their efforts to boost those KPIs because the traditional tools that we talk about in those contexts are observers of activity. And building a better contact center, improving agent performance, and boosting customer experience and retention requires an analytic application that delivers a roadmap for improvement. It's not enough just to describe what's happened or what is currently happening. The rarely analyzed data is the key to building that improvement roadmap. And all of those data sources and all those silos work together better than they do separately. But just using the traditional tools that you've got is going to keep you standing still rather than managing an ongoing improvement process. Quality monitoring, for example, for all its value, and it has tremendous value, again, I don't want to minimize it, it still gives you a very limited view into what's actually driving calls and into the intentions and factors that motivate the customers. They may say, you know, I'm calling about my bill, and that's what gets coded when the evaluator notes it in the QM session, but there may have been much more at work here. The caller may have spent time in an IVR session or called last month about the same kind of bill, or perhaps he's one of 1,000 people who's calling about the same kind of problem, and it cropped up because the billing department changed the format of the bill. Now people don't understand it. These kinds of problems crop up all the time. And you're going to get very limited insight from your old tools. And what insight you do get isn't going to be enough to help you figure out what's causing things to go off plan. They tell you whether one or several agents is doing what you told them to do, but it doesn't alert you to the fact that what you're telling them to do may not be the best thing. It may, in fact, be harmful or counterproductive, depending on the context. And add to that the fact that these traditional tools were built to measure traditional things that are easily counted, like calls and how long those calls take. They weren't built to correlate those metrics with costs and with revenues and with potentialities that are what I call compound metrics, things that are much more nuanced and less call-centery. And that's why analytics is so important, because it brings all those elements into the mix. The next slide, optimizing handle time. I don't think anybody would argue with the idea that contact centers are pretty finely tuned, highly automated engines of productivity, and that they're continually improving their performance. But doing that becomes more difficult and expensive over time because the benefits tend to level off and plateau. Coaching and optimization technologies can certainly make the center more efficient. But to do that, they require a lot of better data that comes from a wider variety of sources. In addition to those traditional contact center sources, the ones I mentioned earlier, and we're talking here about switches and workforce management tools, they benefit from tying in CRM and other customer data sources, and maybe more relevant to these days, customer feedback surveys that can play a very big role in understanding how well training is working or whether marketing may be sending customers mixed messages. It's clear that traditional performance optimization focuses on the ability of an agent to handle more calls more quickly. By contrast, analytics allows for the scripts and business rules that guide the entire customer interaction to be continually assessed. So you can discern whether the workflows that are in place meet your current business conditions, and you can change them if they don't. For example, you can see the relationship between how a customer behaves with an agent and how he engaged with that IVR system just seconds earlier. And if necessary, the guidelines for the agent's end of that interaction can be changed, and a risky interaction can be turned into a positive one. And it's the ability to continually evaluate and improve the underlying processes that's one of the key benefits of looking inside the content of the contact center's data warehouses. And it goes beyond the capabilities of today's typical standalone quality monitoring and coaching systems. When you do it consistently, constantly, you find that it's a process that never really ends. You're always refining your way around the contact center process and building on past successes and mistakes, and along the way you improve the value of the contact center to the organization by boosting the metrics that matter inside the contact center, the handle time and the call duration, but also those metrics that executives really care about, things like customer satisfaction, revenue, and churn. Next slide. If you want to improve the revenue picture of a contact center, you have to improve the ability of an agent to understand what's going on at the moment of the interaction. In other words, you have to ask yourself, does that person have all the tools and facts and relevant perspectives to know what the customer is going to want and how to deal with it? And improving the ability of these agents to do their job has to do with making the environment much more amenable to the things that you want them to do. And one of the places to do that is to apply analytics to those workflows that lead to success or failure, so you can replicate or eliminate those practices that are either good or bad. And as part of it, we're seeing centers that are interested in learning how to push decision-making down to the first-line agent wherever it's possible to do that. But you really only want to do that if they're equipped with the tools that allow them to make the correct decisions. You don't want the weakest link in your chain, which is sometimes the agent, to be making critical, important decisions if they're not supplied with accurate and adequate information. And when you combine traditional performance boosting through the things we're all very used to, like measurement and feedback tools, with some of this process monitoring and analytics applications that are now gaining currency, when you combine all that stuff with better access to a wider variety of information sources, you improve the potential revenue picture. Now, contact center executives don't necessarily understand which metrics are relevant in which contexts and how the applications that they work with are able to work together. There's an awareness, I think, of the huge amount of data that goes to the center and the need to make more sense out of it and render it actionable. The problem for operations people is trying to quantify the inputs and the variables associated with delivering all this different kind of information in different formats to agents with various skill levels who have different types of interactions to handle. So if you want to understand where the best opportunity is for a cross-sell or an upsell, or which agent is best suited to pitch a particular offer, or who should get extra sales training because they're either that good or that bad at that particular kind of interaction, you have to apply some level of analysis to the whole system of data that's flowing through the center. On the next slide, security and PCI compliance. There really does continue to be an ongoing process of new regulations about how to handle customer credit card data, other kinds of personal information. And this is probably going to get more stringent and is going to incorporate more cross-border regimes as many companies do multinational business and use multi-site offshore outsourcers. And the challenge there is providing increasingly personalized service without stepping over the line in terms of compromising customer confidentiality or data security. And the history of call recording and contact center operations really has been a long tension between collecting lots of information on the one hand, and on the other hand, locking that information down and making it secure. And part of that is making sure that customers feel comfortable with the privacy that you've got in place so that they can easily give you the insight into their wants and needs for you to make them better offers and offer more personalized interactions. And we've also had to cope with certain industry-specific regimes for security like HIPAA in the healthcare field, do not call for outbound. There's a patchwork of state laws for collections. Of course, the recent PCI standards for security in the credit card processing sector. When we talk about all the improvements that have been made to operations over the last few years, one of the biggest ones is the boost in agent performance and quality that we've seen as a result of how we're recording and evaluating the voice calls themselves. But PCI says that you can't store any sensitive authentication data. That includes card validation codes, and all kinds of sensitive, specific bits of information. You can't save that stuff after authorization, even if it's encrypted. And then that affects how you record and store all kinds of digital recordings of customer calls. The key for call centers is that they've got to figure out a way to navigate those critical standards without sacrificing the ability to mine the calls for performance data, because you're going to need that stuff for root cause analysis of interaction problems. And that means that innovative PCI compliant solutions have to be welded to whatever analysis engines you're using to reach into the content of those calls. And Patrick, I think, is going to delve more deeply into actually how you do that. Pardon me. So on the next slide, just to wrap up on my end, what is your takeaway? If anything, I want you to come away from this with the idea that analytics isn't an abstract, difficult tool to get a handle on. It's going to be a critical element of most contact centers before too long. And the reason for that is that it's essential to solving some of these very thorny and very real business problems. Analytics, though, is not about throwing money and technology at a problem and hoping it goes away. It's about looking inside the vast pools of data that are generated by call centers and finding the undiscovered nuggets of knowledge that you can act on to make more money and operate more efficiently. And these pools include the voice recordings and the call data and the CRM data and everything else. And analytics' best use is to break down the silos. Essentially, what analytics is supposed to do for you is make more of the low-hanging fruit for you to pick in finding ways to optimize your center's performance. And if you do that, you're going to see the ROI for analytics in concrete ways that are measurable. And you can see it in things like better sales results, in higher ratios of service to sales, better customer retention, longevity, and satisfaction. And I would encourage you to look at analytics as a way to find the biggest bang for the buck, to leverage the recording tools, the process tools, and the data that you've already got, and put them to work, finding opportunities inside and outside your contact center. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the more concrete ways that you can apply analytics in the context of those 5 really thorny business problems. Patrick?
Thank you so much, Keith, for that wonderful overview of analytics and introduction to these 5 critical business problems. As discussed, I'm going to dive deeper into these issues and show you how analytics can really get under the hood and help you identify and solve these issues much quicker than anything you may be doing today. Before we get into that, I'd like to give you an introduction to VPI. If you're not familiar with us yet, we've been in business for 15 years, and we're the leading provider of interactions recording, quality assurance, analytics, and workforce optimization solutions for contact centers. We serve over 1,300 customers daily in over 50 countries worldwide. We partner with the top communications and contact center software providers, including Avaya, Cisco, Mitel, Aspect, Genesys, Siemens, Nortel, and several others, to make sure that we're always compliant tested and integrated in with the latest releases that they're putting out there. So you don't have to worry about integrations when you're upgrading those systems. You can count on us for seamless recording and analytics and reporting on those platforms. We're the first company to develop ready-to-use workforce optimization software solutions. What that means is we've worked very closely with our customers and with analysts like Gartner, Frost & Sullivan, and Ventana Research and DMG and several others to determine what the primary KPIs and metrics and features and capabilities that your industry uses and requires. So we built those metrics and reports and dashboards into the software already, so it really cuts down on implementation time. And as you grow and evolve, it's very easy to customize all these metrics and reports within the system. So it really lowers your total cost of ownership dramatically. And we pride ourselves on being highly responsive. Our customers love doing business with us, and that's a key aspect in our value proposition. Here's some of our customers, some which you may recognize. And now I'd like to dive directly into the latest, hottest, most revolutionary analytics solution out there, and it's called desktop analytics. And Keith referred to this as being kind of the next wave in analytics. And it really is extremely powerful. And what it allows you to do is, as your agents are navigating through their applications, it allows you to tag virtually anything on their screens. So imagine you're sitting behind an agent or standing behind an agent, but you can't hear what they're saying. Can you tell what type of call they're on just by the applications they're navigating through and what fields they're entering? Most likely. So it's that same concept where you want to say, all right, we're going to follow the agent as they navigate through their applications. We're going to not only tag the events that occurred, when they went into this screen, when they exited the screen, when they went into another screen and exited, so we can have that timing. But we also are going to pull as much data or valuable information as we can from those applications. You may want to pull things like customer ID number, which a lot of our customers have been asking for years, and typically we do a back-end integration to the CRM system or their homegrown system, but that can take more time. This is as simple as drawing a box around the field, customer ID number, and pulling that information directly from the screen. You may want to pull things like case ID number, the sales or collections values, right? And we'll get into why pulling all this data and tagging as much data to your interaction recordings, your call audio recordings, your email recordings, your web chat recordings, whatever pertains to your environment, but why you want to tag as much information as possible to those and the value of that. You may want to tag when an agent goes into a screen where there's sensitive credit card information or patient private information for HIPAA, so you can take some action on that sensitive part of the interaction. And we'll get into PCI compliance a little bit later. Just to give you an example of a case use of this is an order information screen. Imagine this being the screen that your agents use, and whatever type of screen or applications they're using, if it's Windows-based or web-based, you can apply desktop analytics to. So in this case, the agent clicks on the General tab, which starts the order. At that point, you say, all right, I want to mark that on the call recording, and you're going to see it in the media player here. We have a real visual media player where at that point it gets tagged to the call. You also at that point want to capture, let's say you're interested in order ID and customer ID. And imagine your systems. You can pull any information that may be of value from your system, so you can easily search for those records and do analytics on those records. So in this case, we're pulling order ID at the start of the order. It's order ID 372-987. We're also pulling customer ID. And the agent's going to continue the order, going to enter additional information, and then they're going to commit the order. They're going to hit OK. It's committed. At this point, you can also grab additional information that the agent entered. You may want to grab things like the order type, or if you're in a reservation center, the reservation type, reservation numbers, things like that. So in this case, we're pulling order type equals upgrade. You can see in the media player on the bottom that we're capturing that information and tagging it to the recording. We're also tagging order value of $395.50 to the recording, and that's going to be very valuable when we get into solving these business issues. So traditional quality monitoring results in very low value evaluations typically. Typically, supervisors or QA analysts today are evaluating 3 to 5 to 10 calls per agent per month, depending on their program. And the majority of those interactions are very low value. Here you can see a typical bell curve of the types of interactions you're evaluating today. But what we're really striving for is these high-value interactions. So we're looking for the worst practice and the best practice interactions. And how do we do that? And and analytics really allows us to do that and allows us to filter out and let us focus on those high-value interactions. So the way it allows us to do that is, you have your recorded files, you have your audio files, you may record screen video, or you may want to record screen video, which is very powerful in allowing you to see how agents are navigating through the calls or the interactions, during the audio portion and then during agent wrap-up as well. So very powerful. So you have your files, your recorded files, and then our analytics tool we call VPI Fact Finder. What Fact Finder does is essentially allows you to tag vast amounts of valuable data to your recording. So we pull it from call metadata, and you may be doing that already today. The video monitor here, that's a reference for desktop analytics, where we're pulling desktop data, desktop events directly from their applications and tagging things like customer ID and when they entered sensitive application screens, things like that. And we're also pulling ACD and dialer information and data directly from those systems as well. So we have a wealth of intelligence now tagged to your recorded files. Then what it's going to do, it's going to automatically assemble your interactions. Typically, today we evaluate call segments. So if we're lucky, we may get a single interaction that includes holds and transfers and things of that nature. But typically, it's just a call segment. It's one part where an agent calls in, and you evaluate up until the point where they got transferred. And if you're lucky, you get the transfers and the holds. But it's still one interaction. What we're really looking to do is evaluate the total customer experience, give us much more insight into our business processes and issues we may be having serving customers. So what you're going to be able to do with analytics and with the VPI system is say, all right, for the last 30 days, give me all interactions that this customer contacted us by. So they may have called 7 times in the last 30 days, and some of those times they may have been put on hold for multiple minutes, 8 minutes, and then transferred to the wrong agent, and then had to call in again. And you get that whole customer experience. So you can really evaluate what caused that customer to leave, right, or to take a certain action. And that's really where analytics helps you not only identify those interactions, but also pull everything together using what we call an automated interaction assembly. So just to give you an example back to quality monitoring, an agent takes 3,600 calls per month. Let's say the supervisor evaluates 3 calls per agent per month. What you're getting is a very, very low sampling rate. This sampling rate isn't really valid. You can evaluate the agent well, but you can't make any valid business decisions on such a small sample size. Can't say, oh, I know why our customers are defecting. It's because of this. So we also typically give feedback 7 days later, 30 days later, and we'll pull agents off the phone and into a classroom. And even if they're doing well, they get pulled off into the classroom as well, and we train all agents on what we heard that month or that quarter. So the difference between traditional QM and where many organizations are going today is more of an analytically driven, targeted QM, with agents still taking the same number of calls, 3,600 calls per month. But now what you're going to do is you're going to really focus on these key business issues that you're looking to solve. So it may be one of the 5 that Keith referred to earlier, or maybe a different business issue you have, but you want to focus on interactions related to those business issues. Now you're going to sample 3 out of, let's say, 200 cancel accounts this month for an agent. The agent may say, that's not fair. You're evaluating my canceled accounts. Those are my worst calls. But you're evaluating every agent on canceled accounts. And so you're evaluating your agents still fairly. It's still a random sample of canceled accounts. But now you're able to get a much higher sampling rate of 1.5%, one that even politicians are elected on less than that. And you're going to get much better accuracy into why your customers are canceling their accounts and how you can improve retention and what you need to do, what next steps. And typically this is followed by automated coaching and training, and we'll talk about why the actions that you take once you find out what the issue is, that you put automated actions in place and actually take action on your findings. That's a huge of huge importance when actually trying to solve these issues versus just finding out the root cause. So you can send target training, within the new workforce optimization systems directly to the desktops of the agents that are underperforming in certain areas. When the queues aren't as full, or when you'd like them to take coaching, you can assign that automatically. So how would you solve other issues? We talked about canceled accounts, right? But how would you do first contact resolution? Well, what you're going to do is you're just going to tell the system, all right, I want to bucket different types of calls. For first contact resolution, it's a major issue. I want to bucket repeat interactions. Customer defection, we talked about canceled accounts. You may look at canceled order. Give me all those, and let's focus on evaluating those interactions to find out what's going on. For handle time optimization, there's different types of interactions that you want to bucket, and we'll talk about what types you may want to look at. Sales and collections, the same thing. And PCI compliance is one of the hottest issues today with many organizations and many of our customers, and analytics really helps solve that, and we'll talk about how. So first contact resolution, why is it so critical? And Keith touched upon this being one of the most important metrics today, and it is proven to be the highest correlated measure to customer satisfaction of all metrics. So you can see some stats here. Customer satisfaction is 35% lower when a second call is made, and every 1% gain in first call resolution translates into a 1% gain in customer satisfaction, which is huge. It's also a major contributor to cost. 66% of contact center costs today are due to callbacks. So that's huge. I mean, think of all the people that have to call back or contact you again because they're not getting their issue solved. And you probably can think of several personal experiences where you had to contact a company or an organization over and over and over again, and it's frustrating, and it's very costly to that organization. The cost of a complaint call not handled at the point of entry escalates by 500% when it has to be escalated. So think of those costs, and if you could just improve your FCR by a few percentage points, what that impact would be in your organization. So these are the most common methods of measuring FCR today. There's many methods, and there's no silver bullet. I think analytics is pointing in the direction of being that silver bullet. But typically today, the most common methods are calculations from a CRM or a customer contact management system, call quality monitoring, recent surveys. So here's several types of surveys. So recent contact survey. Some organizations are using post-call surveys, and some are still asking the agent to make that determination of whether or not the call was resolved in the first contact. There are pros and cons to each of these methods, but these methods, while being used today, aren't really the best, and we'll talk about why analytics is a superior method. But a calculation from a CRM system, if you have it in place, it can be very consistent. If you don't already, it can be very expensive to do and difficult to implement. The key with this is it's typically not tied to any actions. You have to take a lot of manual actions. Once you find out what your first contact resolution rate is on certain types of interactions, it's not tied to any actions, and we'll get into why that's so important. Random call quality monitoring and customer surveying, it's simple to do, and I think that's why a lot of organizations are doing it, but it's based on a small random sample of calls. Not every customer takes a survey. Not every call is quality monitored, And typically that information is not utilized right away, so we're not taking action on that right away. Some companies are being more progressive, and if a customer says that it wasn't resolved on the first contact, they're getting called by a customer safe team or something of that nature, so they're actually taking action. But with either of these methods, such as surveying and call quality monitoring, that customer may have said, or the agent may have done what they could have done on that interaction to handle it, and then the customer calls in a day later or calls in 30 days later because their bill's still wrong when they get their bill 30 days later. So it's difficult not only to take action to set those systems up, but it's not as accurate because you may have a customer contacting you again, even though they said that their issue was solved at that point. So what do you need to know to more accurately measure and improve FCR more rapidly? The three things you need to know is who's the customer, why are they contacting you, and when did they last contact you for that same reason. I'm going to show you what that looks like in the VPI system, and we have a first contact resolution module solution pack. And essentially, in a help desk or a service environment, it's very simple. We're looking for the case ID or the service ticket ID. And if you think about it, every time a customer calls in with that same case ID or service ticket, they're calling, you know who the customer is, you know why they're contacting you, it's for that same reason, and then you just have to apply when did they last contact you. So you may have a rule that says, all right, if they don't contact you for that same service ticket within 30 days, 60 days or whatever, then we're going to close it out. And you may have a closeout thing within your system as well that we could track. Other environments, it becomes a little bit more tricky because you're looking for now customer ID. You don't have a case ID or anything. You have a customer, and customer ID could be an incoming phone number, it could be an account ID, it may be whatever you use to track your customers with. But you also need to know the reason they contacted you. So think about it. You know, there's multiple ways. You may be using agent disposition codes or call disposition codes where the agent actually selects a disposition. If you're doing that, that can work really well. I just encourage you to quality monitor those disposition codes to make sure that they are selecting the proper disposition or reason codes in your system and not selecting general inquiry, one of the first couple options in the drop-down. Another way to do it is just follow the applications using desktop analytics. What applications are they entering? Because you may have a customer calling in for 5 different reasons, right? They changed their address, they have a question about a bill, they want to order a new product or service. All those reasons can be tracked using desktop analytics as well. So that's what we need to accurately measure, and we'll get into some of the things we can do once you find out what types of interactions are causing customers to contact you again, what you can do about that. Optimizing handle time is another big issue that Keith mentioned. A lot of organizations are kind of shying away from handle time because they don't want to affect customer satisfaction. But if you think of all the interactions that your agents handle and the opportunity there is for a lot of those interactions to reduce handle time without affecting customer satisfaction at all. In fact, you may even boost customer satisfaction because customers don't want to wait on the phone a long time. They don't want to have to go back and forth. So what you're looking for is types of interactions or even segments within interactions that you can optimize. So we recommend looking at average handle time by interaction type, right? Type of, whether it's you have multiple products, look at different contacts by products, by reasons. Look at your handle time by the reasons people are calling, things of that nature. You're going to find areas where you can improve your processes and your policies within those interactions where you can reduce without affecting handle time. We also recommend analyzing handle time by processes within your interaction. So think about it. Let's look at how long is it taking our agents to, change an address or adjust something on a bill or answer a customer's question of this nature or, complete an upsell. Let's see if we can optimize handle time within the interaction, not necessarily the entire interaction, because that's what companies are shying away from. But let's look within your interactions. Are there certain events? And again, what we're doing is we're just using desktop analytics to say they went into this screen at this point and then they left the screen at this point. We can time that, and we can time that across agents, groups, different clients of yours, and so forth. You also want to analyze and look at call flow, determine the root cause of calls with multiple holds, right? Calls with long hold time, calls with multiple transfers. You're going to get a lot of valuable information if you listen to these high-value interactions to figure out how you can reduce hold time, transfers, and things of that nature. In the sales and collections environment, analytics also provides a tremendous opportunity for improvement. In a sales environment, what are the types of calls you want to bucket, right? What are the ones you want to focus on? You want to focus on successful upsell and cross-sell attempts, incomplete sales attempts. Maybe your agents are giving issuing credits when they don't really need to be. Things of that nature can all help to improve revenue. And really what you're looking for is these successful upsells, cross-sells, successful sales agents. What you're looking to do is replicate that behavior of your top agents across all of your agents. Same thing in a collections environment. You want to dig down and really focus on finding out what are the reasons we have calls with long handle times, but they didn't result in a promise to pay. Again, what you're doing is we're collecting all this data, tagging it to your recordings, and so we can do that. We can look at things, calls with long handle times and no promise to pay, because we're able to correlate data from multiple systems now. Calls with quick hang-ups, high collections amounts, maybe calls where there's an instant payment. We want to replicate that behavior and train our other agents on what's working to gather an instant payment. Late fees waived. Maybe a promise to pay, but there's no collection down the line in the future. These are all going to give us valuable insight. And the beauty of this is analytics just plays into your current processes. What you're going to use, if you already have a quality monitoring team, it's just going to allow your quality monitoring team to evaluate higher value interactions and actually make suggestions on how you can improve business performance versus just agent performance. PCI compliance, right? This also applies to HIPAA as well, and some of the other sensitive information or sensitive regulations. What you're going to do is as soon as an agent enters a screen where there's credit card information, we're going to note that, and then when they leave that, we also mark that in the interaction recording, and VP allows you to mask out the video and mute out the audio at that point where there's sensitive information. So very powerful application, and one that allows you to not only satisfy your liability concerns and needs, but also your compliance needs as well, which a lot of our customers love. Now, this is really the key to solving these 5 critical business issues, and it's taking all that root cause information, and once you've figured out why things are happening or where there's room for improvement and policies can be changed and processes can be changed, now we need to make that actionable. So we talk about making analytics actionable, and we've built a very powerful business rules engine into our system that allows you to use templates. So you just basically, they're templates with drop-down menus, and you can set up business rules to do virtually any type of action to help solve that issue. So you may want to tag certain types of high-value calls for quality monitoring. You may want to populate real-time tickers, agent scorecards, management reports with information. You may want to assign coaching and e-learning directly to the agents that need that, directly to their desktops or to a training room. You may want to send alerts and notifications out based on thresholds. And many of our customers even decide, all right, let's not save, let's archive, let's not archive certain types of calls that aren't of value to us. If it was a low-value sale or it didn't result in a sale, let's not store that. Let's just focus on keeping the high-value calls. And we can do that because we have so much data tagged to each recording, and we're applying this very powerful rules engine to automate a lot of the actions. And this is where many organizations fall down, is they try to implement analytics. They found out some neat things, but they're not taking the appropriate action they need to in order to solve the issue. So here's some examples of what a desktop ticker would look like. The first one being in a service environment. And these are just real-time tickers that sit and dock on the, above or below the agent's applications, the supervisors, the managers, and it's roles-based. So depending on who you are, you get to see what metrics you're being tracked on. Maybe it's individual metrics versus your goal or versus your group. So you can see exactly in real time where you are at all times. And these are fantastic and motivating employees. These are, in all the work I do with our customers, the ROI on these real-time tickers is just a few weeks. It's amazing how much healthy competition it promotes. And it's one of those things where agents want to do well, but unless you can give them the information they need to be successful, it's going to be difficult. So this gives it to them. It tells them where they're at, where they need to be, and managers are able to see like team views and department views and things of that nature. Very customizable. It's drag and drop what metrics, KPIs in the system that you want to add to here, to these tickers. And the second ticker here is a sample of a collections ticker. So these could be values that you're pulling directly from your collections application. Again, we don't have to do a back-end integration. We can if you'd like us to, but we can just pull it directly from the screen, the agent's application screens, and put that information, consolidate it, and put it into tickers in front of them and in front of your managers. We also offer scorecards as well, so we can compare different teams and different agents within teams and so forth, and have more of a graphical view to create views into all the different KPIs you're tracking. These performance dashboards, if you think of like a My Yahoo or an iGoogle, very customizable based on your role. Every user can create their own if you'd like, or you can create them for agents, for supervisors, and then they see that information related to them. And this can be customized with quality information, or performance management, or coaching, or whatever you'd like to see here. You may have one for each of the 5 critical business issues you're trying to solve, one on first contact resolution. Maybe you have 6 on first contact resolution and so forth, but very customizable. And then a huge key is the coaching and training. 60% of all repeat calls are training or process driven. So that 60% of first contact resolution type of interactions that you're trying to solve, you can actually affect. It's either going to be something you change in a process to improve that process, or you're going to train the agents to make them successful on how to handle interactions in the first contact. The other 40% might be something outside the contact center. So as Keith mentioned, it may be a marketing campaign that's driving, giving misinformation and driving repeat calls into your contact center. It may be a product issue, so you have to work closely with engineering. It may be something with shipping and logistics, so you need to have good relationships with those departments as well in order to resolve those issues. But a lot of the issues can be resolved head-on with training and just reviewing your processes. The beauty is coaching and learning integrates with your workforce management system, so you can either schedule, coaching periods within workforce management, or you can do it when the queues are lower and there's time for agents to get on coaching. It can allow them to take self-paced coaching courses or e-learning, and it tracks. It's so wonderful because it tracks everything down to how much time they spend on each question within the quizzes and so forth if you set it up in the right way. And the call volume comes back up in the middle of coaching, it'll just pause it. They can resume it at the next time. It's one of the most flexible e-learning packages that I've ever experienced, and our customers love it. And then alerts and early warning notifications are really key when you're trying to resolve these issues. These are not easy issues. If they were, then everyone would have already solved them. So the ability to put in real-time alerts or near real-time alerts as early warning indicators. So for an example, if a team drops below this metric, or at an agent level, let's say a customer cancels their account, the agent hits the cancel button on their application. You can have that automatically send a notification to management, or perhaps even a customer save team, right, and try to win that customer back, which can be very successful companies that have been doing that. So I hope you found this webinar today valuable, and we look forward to the opportunity to work very closely with you and help solve your business needs. And I can be reached directly at my number, 1-800-200-5430, extension 5214, or contact me at my email here, or visit our website at www.bpi-corp.com for more information, and also host a LinkedIn group with over 4,500 other call center professionals, and we have great discussions and help solve each other's issues on LinkedIn. So I invite you to look up call center experts on LinkedIn and join us there as well. So thank you so much for your time today, and again, look forward to the opportunity to working closely with you.